All right, it's 2 minutes in, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. Feel free to chat at any time with questions or comments, and I'll try to answer those as best I can during the presentation and then also check them at the end. Hi, Christopher. Thanks for joining. Okay. So micro-credentials. I am here to talk about micro-credentials and how they are disrupting traditional professional development. Another way of putting it that maybe is a little less aggressive is that they are complementing traditional professional development. I don't think that all PD will become micro-credentialing, but I do think that micro-credentials have a very important, very powerful role to play in PD. Before we dive into the topic of micro-credentials, I'll just share a little bit about my background and the organization that I'm coming from. I work for a nonprofit called UTeach Computer Science, and we are based at the University of Texas at Austin. We are part of the College of Natural Science at UT. The UTeach Institute is sort of our umbrella organization, and they are actually involved in pre-service teacher preparation for undergraduate STEM majors. So if any student who's studying math, science, or computer science wants to become a teacher and get certified during their undergraduate experience at UT, they can go through the UTeach preparation program and get that certification. The program dates back to about 1996, I think, and it was developed by faculty experts and experienced STEM educators. It's based on research around inquiry-focused instruction, and that has been a big thread in bringing into our work in the computer science side. The UTeach Computer Science is part of the UTeach Institute, which was started in 2015 or thereabouts. It actually grew out of an NSF grant to develop curriculum for APCS principals, but it was even before there was an APCS principals class, so it was just called Thriving in Our Digital World. That later became the APCS principals course that we now offer. And my organization has expanded to APCSA curriculum and PD, and then also to micro-credentials, which is the subject of this presentation. We work mostly with in-service computer science teachers. So unlike UTeach, we are actually on the in-service K-12 side of things rather than undergraduate. So before I get too far ahead of myself, if you do hop off this presentation, I want you to have this information before you go. So we are offering an incentive program that's funded by the US Department of Education that if you complete a micro-credential before March 1st, you can actually earn $50 in Amazon gift cards. So there's a bit.ly link right there, bit.ly/cs-micro-credential. It is case sensitive. If you want to go there and check it out, you can see our micro-credentials. And as long as you do that micro-credential, you earn it before March 1st, you'll be entered to win one of those $50 Amazon gift cards. And you don't have to do anything in order to be entered. It's just automatic that anybody's name who submits a micro-credential gets added to that list. And we'll do the drawing for 20 $50 gift cards on March 1st. So our approach at UTeach Computer Science, kind of drawing on the UTeach Institute and the work that they have done with inquiry-based instruction, is that we highly prioritize project-based collaborative instruction that is centers around problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration among students. We also try to make our curriculum as personally meaningful as possible in order to motivate all students to pursue computer science. So this manifests in plugged and unplugged activities that really allow all students to pursue topics that they find meaningful and to personalize and customize the work that they do in computer science class. Our micro-credentials are part of a larger SEED grant from the US Department of Education. This SEED stands for Supporting Effective Educator Development, and it's supporting the goals of expanding that UTeach secondary STEM teacher preparation pathway across multiple universities. That model of teacher preparation is actually replicated at 44 universities right now, with more on the way. It also is increasing the number of computer science teachers in high-need schools, so producing more CS teachers as a result of those undergraduate pathways. And then finally, studying the role that CS curriculum and teacher support play in strengthening CS education over the next 3 years. And that's the part where the micro-credentials really come in, is once a teacher is already certified to teach computer science, or maybe they're able to teach CS as an out of area, what is the role of micro-credentials in supporting their further growth as an educator, and giving them research-backed skills that will increase the effectiveness and the engagement of their teaching. We've been working with a company called Digital Promise. They are a global ecosystem for micro-credentials. They offer more than just micro-credentials, but in terms of micro-credentialing, they're one of the best known organizations. Not the only one, but one of the most rigorous, and in terms of its research backing and how they partner with different organizations to leverage the specific disciplinary knowledge of those organizations and bring that into the platform. So I'll show you what the platform looks like in just a second. But before we go there, I just want to say that there are over 450 badges from over 50 organizations. That includes 7, almost 8 badges from our organization, UTeach Computer Science. We actually have our 8th one being published next week. And you can go and explore those badges and just see if there's any topics that interest you. The variety of badging is really amazing, and just the variety of organizations that have become part of this ecosystem. So Digital Promise is acting as, they develop their own badges, but they also act as just a clearinghouse for other organizations, bringing everybody together and creating a platform where micro-credentials are fairly standardized. The format of the micro-credentials is very similar, even if the topics vary across different micro-credentials, different badges. So the micro-credentials are developed, assessed, and awarded by partner organizations, including my organization, UTeach CS. So if you submit a micro-credential that is one of our micro-credentials, you apply for that badge, we would actually be reviewing that and either awarding or denying. If we deny the badge, you get feedback and then you're able to resubmit for it. So I'll jump over now to just give you a quick look at Digital Promise. When you go to the micro-credentials section of Digital Promise, this is what it looks like. You're able to search for any topic for micro-credentials in the search bar. You can also look at the organizations specifically that offer micro-credentials. And then UTeach Computer Science is here, so I'll just go to our micro-credentials. Once you search for something, you'll find that the micro-credentials are organized by stacks. So this icon right here says that these 2 micro-credentials are part of a stack called Computer Programming and Debugging. We have 2 micro-credentials, the 3rd is on the way in this stack, Code Tracing and Rubber Duck Debugging. These are more centered specifically around programming and topics that CS teachers would use, dedicated CS teachers. The second stack that we developed is called Instructional Strategies for Computer Science, and that is, these ones are much more broad. They could be applied by any teacher who is integrating computational thinking or computer science activities into their classroom. And all of these are research-backed. So all of them have been fully vetted and come from research literature in the field of computer science, computational thinking. I'll also point out that 2 of these, active and equitable recruitment strategies, and the last one, peer instruction, which we'll actually look at a little bit more in depth, those could be used by any K-12 teacher. They really have been written by somebody, me, who is coming from computer science background, but I did think intentionally about how that could be applied to any course, any teacher in any course. Okay, so going back to the presentation. We have a video I'm going to share from Digital Promise. I think this does a really nice job of summarizing micro-credentials. Great. a nice introduction from Digital Promise. To break down some of the topics that they brought up in that video, I'll just go over a quick list of what I see as different in terms of professional development experience in a micro-credential versus traditional professional development. So traditional PD, when I was a teacher teaching middle school and elementary school, usually PD was you go somewhere, you sit in a chair, you have a presenter, gives you some information, you maybe practice that and do some workshopping, and then you leave. There was no follow-up necessarily where you actually were taking what you've learned and putting that into play in your own classroom. Micro-credentials, in the way that Digital Promises designed them, does not follow that traditional model. So they are competency-based. They are not based on seat time. Doesn't matter how many hours you spend to complete a micro-credential. All that matters is that you've submitted evidence that shows your actual in-classroom work with your students, demonstrating that you have developed competence in a specific skill or set of skills. Next, they are research-backed. A lot of professional development that I attended didn't necessarily have a research backing. That doesn't mean that it wasn't valuable, but all the micro-credentials that are on Digital Promises platform are backed in research. And that illustrates how each competency is connected to supporting student learning and student outcomes. Next, the micro-credentials are personalized. Oftentimes with professional development, traditionally you're assigned to go to a professional development workshop. You may have some sort of selection that's given to you that you get to choose from, but more often, you're given this PD and then you go. Micro-credentialing is, hi Vicki, thank you for writing in the chat. Awesome. So micro-credentials are extremely personalized. They're at the very, very far end of the spectrum in terms of how personalized you can make professional development, because literally you can go onto Digital Promise and search for any specific skill that's aligned to whatever personal or professional goals you have, and then do that micro-credential to earn the badge related to it. You can go and select, just from anything. It could be in your area, out of your area. If you're interested in something that is a little bit far afield, it just makes it very easy for you to find those opportunities, even if it's not within your normal subject area. Next, they are on demand. So PD has moved a little bit more virtual in the last year because of COVID, and maybe a little bit more toward the on-demand side of things. Also, there's MOOCs that massive open online courses that you can complete. Micro-credentials are more along those lines than the traditional professional development model, where you had a specific start and end time, whether it's a half-day workshop or a one-week experience. You go, you start, and you stop along with everybody else doing that professional development. Micro-credentialing is not like that. It allows you to choose when you start a micro-credential or continue it on your own pace. There's no external timekeeping that's happening. It just is on your own schedule. So that makes them really much more available to fit in whatever schedule teachers might have. And lastly, micro-credentials, unlike most forms of professional development, are shareable. Digital Promise is built on an open source badging platform that means that once you earn a micro-credential and you earn the badge that goes along with it, that badge is open. It can be accessed by anyone if you share a link to it, and it can be verified for authenticity. Did it actually come from the organization that it says it came from? Does it actually belong to the person who's saying it belongs to them? And they're portable to any open badging system. There's a lot of different badging systems where you can collect micro-credentials and manage them yourself. You also get to control where it's shared if you are the earner. So steps to earning a micro-credential. After this, I'll hop back over into Digital Promises platform to show what one micro-credential actually looks like up close. So the steps are really straightforward, very easy to follow. First, you just select that skill that you have developed or would like to develop. So unlike traditional PD, it doesn't matter if you've already learned it. If you want to earn a badge and you already have that skill, the micro-credentialing allows you to gain recognition for the skill that you've already developed. If you don't have a skill, obviously you can go and develop it. Second step, you collect the required evidence demonstrating your competence in the selected area. Evidence can range from reflection questions that the teacher answers to actual student samples of student work, videos of the classroom or audio recordings of the classroom interactions. There are a lot of different options there, and I'll show you a couple from our micro-credentials. But I'll just point out again that all of these are directly related to classroom implementation of the skill. Next, you would upload and submit your collected evidence on the micro-credential platform where you're doing the application, and then that is assessed by the badge issuer. In the case of our micro-credentials, there'll be somebody on my team. Lastly, once you've earned the micro-credential, you can download a shareable digital badge and also share it directly with social media or email. So let me reshare my screen and then I will hop into the platform again. Okay, so going back to where I was supposed to be showing my screen, this is what it looks like when you go to the Explore tab of the micro-credential platform. You've got a lot of different options that pop up, and each organization has a sort of color scheme, so you can see different orgs have different colors. You can search by terminology, so if you want to search for computational thinking, let's say, you could search here, and then all of the micro-credentials related to computational thinking will pop up. And this is ours. You can also search by the organization. So I'll go to UTeach Computer Science. So you have to take that out. So if you search just for the issuing organization for our micro-credentials, you'll see that they come up in these two stacks. So this symbol right here means that it's part of the stack. The first stack is called computer programming and debugging. Like I said, that's more related to implementing computer science courses, code tracing and river duck debugging. They each have their little badge. And then the second stack is instructional strategies for computer science. And these are the ones that are more generalizable across subject areas, especially if teachers are integrating computer science or computational thinking in their other subject courses. So I'm going to dive into peer instruction. This is one of the micro-credentials that really could be implemented by any educator at any level, K to 16. It comes from a research-backed strategy that was developed by a physics professor out of Harvard, Eric Mazur. And I read a lot of research from different subject areas and synthesized it all into this micro-credential that you could earn. So this is what a single micro-credential looks like. It'll say the price, if there's a price. All of ours are free because they are funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And you can read through the description. So peer instruction, if you're not familiar with it. So it's an active learning strategy to support students' mastery of content knowledge and ability to explain and justify their ideas. Through peer instruction, the educator provides students with the opportunity to teach and learn from each other. As you go down into the micro-credential, it generally follows these specific structural components, so the key method, and then the components of that method. There are often steps on how to implement it that the educator would follow in order to earn the micro-credential. I also tried to synthesize the best practices for implementing peer instruction, just because I've seen it, seen teachers use it in ways that aren't quite as effective. So those are there. Some detailed information about formulating effective questions, talk moves, and then we go into research and resources. This is the area where if you want to dive really deep into the research on it, you can. So this goes into all of the research-backed parts of the micro-credential. So going through here, you've got a lot of links. And then more resources that are not as related to research, but are very helpful. The best practices, some videos of actual peer instruction activities being used in classrooms, examples of peer instruction questions, and a template that I put together to do peer instruction. Lastly, we've got classroom resources. So this is a list of things that can actually help you implement peer instruction, whether you're remote or in person. Especially helpful is this low-tech option for younger students. We click on this. I love this card so much. So this is a foldable colored card. You print it in color. It works really well. So when you ask a peer instruction question, students can just refold it and hold up the answer that corresponds to their answer choice. Okay, and then lastly, I'll point out the final section is always going to be the submission and evaluation section for the microcredential. You'll have at the top a description of what you need to earn in order to get the microcredential. So in this one, you have to receive a passing for parts 1 and 3 and a yes for part 2. Part 2 is going to be graded on a yes, almost, and not yet scale. And so if you get an almost or not yet, you can always go back and edit your microcredential submission and earn the badge. So let's kind of go over this in detail. So part 1, that's an overview. The assessment is responding to these questions. So how did you introduce and structure and the peer instruction activity? Describe how you group students, how you assign the question, and how you collected and displayed student responses. So that gets into kind of the nitty-gritty of like, how did you actually do this in your classroom? And a passing score for this section is the activity description is clear with sufficient detail, and peer instruction is appropriately introduced and structured according to what is laid out earlier on in the microcredential description. Part 2 are those work examples and artifacts. So in this particular, so this can, what's required can vary by microcredential. In this particular one, we asked that you submit that question template that I kind of mentioned earlier. I'll go back to that. Fill that out, showing what the peer instruction question was that you wrote. And then also a video, 10 minutes is plenty, showing the implementation of peer instruction in your classroom. The rubric is collapsible here. Section 1, so yes, almost, not yet, yes, almost, not yet for each of those artifacts. And then lastly, the educator reflection portion is a reflection question asking educators to describe what they learned from implementing peer instruction, including what was the impact of using it in your classroom and what challenges did you face, how might you address those challenges in the future. So again, you have a passing, not passing. Passing is the reflection clearly indicates how the activity affected both the students and the educator, including changes to the educator's pedagogical practice. The reflections are specific and supported by examples. So I'm going to post this link in the chat. I want to give you all just a few minutes to read over this top section. So if you would read from key method up to formulating effective questions. So you can stop at formulating effective questions. I'll give you about 5 minutes or so to read those 3 sections, I think they are. so you may still be finishing up reading those few sections, but once you are finished, I'd love to hear if you write in the chat, how might you use peer instruction in your teaching context? All right, as you're thinking about that, I'm going to jump over to the question template to show you what that looks like. This may help clarify what my peer instruction includes. Loading. That's great, Vicki. Thank you so much for writing that. So you said you use peer instruction from the article. You realize you need to put more time into selecting the questions so that every answer is selected by a few and then move to the second set. I think that's a great learning that you just shared. Looking at this question template, so I designed this to help, basically do what you just said, is guide educators to formulating really effective questions. This is the hardest thing of using peer instruction as a technique, is actually writing that question. It's not the actual doing of the peer instruction activity in class. So to help educators develop those questions, I have this template, and at the top in the gray areas, it says grade level, course subject, targeted concept or skill, and prior knowledge. Those are more for the assessor than the teacher, because the assessors who are looking at the teacher's submission for this badge need to know those things in order to determine whether the peer instruction question has been very thoughtfully introduced. But it can also help to think through those things yourself. So what concept are you really targeting by this question? Is it a single concept, multiple concepts? And then what do you expect students to know already before answering that question? What do they need to know in order to even understand what the question is asking? Then we get into the actual question itself. So it says write your peer instruction question here, including both the question text and answer choices. And if you're using a pre-existing resource, you should credit the source there. So for each answer, then we break down whether the answer is correct or incorrect. Obviously, you can have more than one correct answer. It's like any multiple choice question. It's up to you as the educator whether you want to have one or multiple answers that are correct. And then the thing that I think is so powerful about this is the next prompt. Give the example student reasoning for this choice. So a really good peer instruction question is not only a good question, but the answer choices are really very compelling. So what would make a student want to give this particular answer? What would, we think of it in terms of distractors, but even more than that, like what does the wrong answer choice show about student reasoning on this topic? So maybe a student is learning about for loops and they don't realize that, or a while loop, let's say, and they don't realize that the condition in the while loop is only checked the top of the loop every time. They think it's checked continuously. And so maybe they think that the program will exit the while loop well before it actually does. How could you write answer choices that actually surface that misconception or misunderstanding about how a while loop works? So that's just kind of one thing to get you started in thinking how you might write those questions. Going back to the micro-credential again. So in this last section, I have some instructions on how to formulate effective questions. The thing that I'll point out, I think Vicki, you already brought up, So an indicator, if you're wondering, like, is this a good question that I've written? You won't necessarily know until you use it. Go ahead and use it, see what happens. If not every answer choice is being chosen by at least a few students, then they aren't really distractors. They aren't really compelling answer choices. So you want to have at least one student maybe that's choosing each answer. You don't have to have 4 answers. You can have 2, 3, you could even have 5, whatever you want to do. And then lastly, you want to have about 30 to 50% of students answering correctly. So choosing that, if you have one correct answer, choosing that one correct answer. And then on the second attempt, you want to see that go up into 80, 90, 100% of students answering correctly. If you get responses that are 30 to 50% of students answer correctly on the first time, but then on the second time they answer the question after discussing it in small groups, they're still at like 50 to 60%, that's a clear signal, formative assessment. We need to go back and reteach whatever this concept is and do some worked examples, figure out what's the hang up for students, why they're misunderstanding this concept. And Chris, you wrote, prior to COVID, I had a set of class personal whiteboards to respond to questions, have them write the code snippets on their boards. Awesome, yeah. Whiteboards are really good for peer instruction as well. And then Nearpod is something that you use in your class, and that's one of the good tools, definitely. I had Pear Deck, and I think Nearpod is also in my list. Nope, it's not. I should have added that. Pear Deck and Nearpod should be down here. I've also used these other ones, Poll Everywhere, Slido, Plickers. It's kind of a fun one where you hold up something that's scanned by the app, and then Google Forms kind of has some nice automatically generated diagrams showing like bar graphs about how many students answered which question. And then some LMS systems have this built in where you can do polling. Okay, and then I'll go back to talk moves. Last point I'll make about peer instruction. So talk moves are incredibly powerful for leveraging the ideas that students come up with. So early on as a teacher, when I'd run class discussions, be like, what do you think the answer is? Student would say, I think this is the answer. I'd say, yes, awesome. That's it. So talk moves they keep the conversation going, and they drive deeper into student understanding, like what is going on inside students' heads. So as a teacher, when you do that whole class debrief of the peer instruction question, I really recommend using some of these talk moves. So choose ones that feel natural to you, but I'll just read through the ones that I have here. So if you have students in small groups, pairs or groups of 3 or 4, you might ask your group, why do your group think answer choice A was correct? Or why do you think answer choice B was incorrect if they chose A? You might say, what was your group's reasoning for that choice? Once a group has given their reasoning, you could also then involve other students, turn to other students in the class. Did anyone else have a different reason for selecting that same answer choice? Or who wants to build on that explanation? That's a great way to get students to add more detail. Does anyone agree with that? Does anyone disagree with that explanation? Why might someone think another answer choice was correct? So this is a really powerful one because it forces students into thinking through what the misconceptions are, what might be driving a different answer choice. So if a student says, I chose answer B, you might say, why might someone have chosen answer C? And then the last one is one of my favorites. So taking an incorrect answer choice and making it correct. What would you change in order to make answer choice C correct? So those are some helpful talk moves. Definitely spending time for debriefing is so important because students who still don't get it can learn from the students who are articulating their understanding. And even the students who do get it at some level are forced to go a little bit deeper and to think through to make sure that their understanding is really solidified. Making that understanding, like talking through it, putting it into words is just a really powerful way to reinforce the learning. So that's basically what a micro-credential looks like. We walked through this whole peer instruction one. If you go to our other ones, rubber duck debugging is one of my very, very favorites. I love rubber duck debugging. You can see that there are different components. Each one has different kind of steps and recommendations. There's research articles for each of them, classroom resources. And then I'll just point out like a difference in terms of the actual classroom-based evidence and artifacts. So this one has requests a video submission, 5 to 10 minutes long, and then looks for some particular things captured within that video. So at least one student needs to be conversing with their rubber duck, talking about an error, incorrect output, or talking through their code line by line to find any errors. So that's one of the other ones. And it just varies by micro-credential. So go back to my presentation here. So we went through the steps. I showed you some micro-credentials from my organization. This is a big list, so you can see them all at once. We do have another micro-credential being published next week on planning before programming. So going through how to use storyboarding, flowcharting, and pseudocode to actually prepare students to do coding, well before they actually sit down in front of a computer, but to work out the algorithm ahead of time. I'm very excited about that one. And then lastly, I'll just reiterate that if you complete one of these micro-credentials by March 1st, you'll be entered into a drawing for $50 Amazon gift cards. And it's just a great opportunity to take advantage of not only the free micro-credentials, but you can even earn money for doing them. And we did this one on peer instruction. I'll just end with more contact info from my organization. You can check out our website, uteachcs.org, send us an email at info@uteachcs.org, or find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have. Feel free to ask them in the chat, or you can come on screen and share your audio and video, and I will share the screen with you. Thanks for joining, Vicki. I'm glad that you found it interesting, and definitely reach out if you have any questions.
I do have a question. So can y'all get the high school counselors and administration to start saying that our professional development time could be used to this? Because, we have people on campus that develop professional development. We all go to them, but, I'm in high school. We all teach. I'm an elective. It's like, oh, well, that all's great and good, but, I need to do this. And so this would be so much better because it's so much cooler. It would prevent the district from reinventing the wheel every time people. So yeah, we need to do that.
Amen. Chris said in the chat, preach. I totally agree. I feel like when I was a teacher, this is exactly what I needed, because I knew where I was weak. I knew, like, as a new teacher, my classroom management skills were garbage. Like, I needed help there, but none of our professional development were about classroom management. And so I was left just kind of like cobbling together resources on my own, but then also having to do the seat time and sit down for the week-long thing that's all about science activities and doing inquiry. And like, I was strong on that. I had great content knowledge when I was teaching science. So, it's just, I think we need to empower teachers to be the curators of their own professional learning. And I feel like micro-credentials are, at least to me, like right now, the best way of doing that. The problem, like you said, is just getting those districts and schools on board. So they need to find a way to fit micro-credentials into the systems they've already developed for professional learning for their teachers. So how do you create equivalence where if you do a micro-credential, it's worth a certain number of continuing education units? And a lot of districts have been looking into that, actually. So there's some more innovative districts who are like going full micro-credential, where even like recertification or licensure is a micro-credentialing project. You have some districts who are doing more of that equivalence of like earn a micro-credential, and we will say that that counts for a certain number of professional development credits or continuing education units. Generally, they're between like 5 or 7 per micro-credential from the districts that I've heard that from. But it's a newer idea. I think it's a lot of people are struggling to figure out how it fits into the forms of PD that are traditionally being used. And they're maybe a little bit shy of like, can we really trust this? Like, can teachers really do this? And can we trust that what they've done is worth getting credit for? I think we just need to.
So I have a question. So 2 questions. Okay. So first of all, I think you need to get the state legislature or the state board or whatever, somebody there needs to be informed of how this is so much better and how it would actually save districts some money and all of that, if the state would approve it. And what districts have started doing that? I'm curious.
You know, I don't know of any in Texas. The ones that I've known about thus far are in West Virginia, I want to say Georgia, maybe one in California. There's Digital Promise has some district partners that they like to highlight in some of their webinars, and so I've just learned about it through the webinars and through blog posts and things like that. There is another platform called Bloomboard, and they are actually working specifically on micro-credentials used for licensure. And I forget where, like they have on their website, I think they go into where they're doing that. So but that's specifically around, like, they're not even looking at PD, they're looking at licensure only. So I want to see micro-credentials being used more for PD and putting the right incentives in place, whether that's coming from the state level or from a district, to get teachers into a position where they can actually use that in terms of instead of going to the week-long PD or whatever it is.
Well, listen, it's just in the state of Texas, it's the state that requires all districts to have this in service in so many days, and that calendar is, they're so tied to even a pandemic. It's like, we can't have just a calendar for a pandemic. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So
I totally agree.
And they did something really stupid. Just use this example. So pandemic hits, in service comes in August. We're still doing PD. Do we do PD on how to teach on Zoom or how to use Zoom? No, I was running around. Can someone Zoom with me so I can practice before the first day that I have to Zoom with kids? I mean,
oh my gosh.
Okay. So you need to use that example, go to the state and say, look, this is a credentialing thing. You know, teachers could, if they're weak on Zoom, by now everybody's like, oh, we got that. But but if we had used our time more wisely, everybody would be prepared for school versus sitting there going, oh my God.
That's a great point. And I'm sure that there are even micro-credentials like already on Digital Promise. Like the district would not need to develop those things themselves either. They could take advantage of what's already out there, what's already been vetted, researched, reviewed, all of the process that we go through, which is really rigorous to even publish one micro-credential. So I'd love to see the state getting interested in this. This grant that we've been working on, I've only been developing micro-credentials. We did 8 in the last year. And the grant is like a 3-year program. So I'm not sure if we'll develop more. It just depends on, if they catch on and if the funding's there. But once they're up there forever. So getting somebody, getting the ear of somebody at the State Board of Education
that's going to be key.
Would be really helpful.
Both of those are going to be real key. So hire me as a lobby because I'm real passionate about this. Is we like, oh my God, you people have to do this.
Well, I mean, if you do one of the micro-credentials, like, we'd love to hear about your experience. We have a couple of teachers who've done it and then posted their badge on social media and tagged us, which is always really fun to hear back from them, whether it's valuable, what they liked about it, things like that. So make sure to reach out to us, and we'd love to hear how it goes for you. And you can also share it with your colleagues, post it to whatever boards or professional learning communities you might be part of. And we'd love to have you get the word out there.
Okay. All right.
Thanks so much,
you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I think we are at time, so I'm gonna close down the session. Thank you guys so much for attending. I hope you have a great rest of your day.